used to work with juvenile sex offenders in a mental institution, inpatient hospital. I was staying late supervising a phone call for an offender at night in an office in a somewhat isolated part of the building. I knew him well as he had been at the facility for about 18 months. Although he had violent offenses in the past, he had gone through lots of treatment and was considered fairly safe. He finished his call and I looked away for just a moment. When I looked back, his eyes met mine, and I felt terror. I jumped up and started yelling at him in a very loud and authoritative voice to get up, get out, get moving, and other commands. When I got to a part of the facility where there were other coworkers, I said that I felt that I'd seen in his eyes that he was going to rape me. The next day, I found out he had called his therapist for an emergency session at home because he told him that he was about to rape me that night. I have a ton of these stories. Creepy shit has happened my whole life. My grandparents lived in a gnarly old house and I'd stay there over the summers. Little shit would always happen there. Footsteps when you were the only one home, light switches flip on and off with no one near them, doors randomly open and close, etc. But you got used to it. It would still catch you off guard, but it'd seem innocuous or even playful. Well, my room was in the basement, and that's where the bulk of the nonsense happened. Every once in a while, I'd be in bed reading, and the lights would just turn off. If you turn them back on, they just go off again in the next few minutes. Must be bedtime then, I guess. Mostly playful and innocuous. Fast forward to the end of summer. In the den, there was an old mirror with an almost sepia hue to it on the far wall. Getting to the base of the stairs leading into the basement puts you directly in line with it. You almost cannot avoid looking into it when you get to the bottom of the stairs because of where it is positioned. I started getting a creepy vibe in the basement out of nowhere over a few days. As I'm going down to go to bed one night, I get to the bottom of the stairs and suddenly I'm staring at a man I've never seen before in the mirror. I just froze. I tried to look away but couldn't for what seemed like minutes, probably a few seconds, but I'm petrified with terror. I vividly remember that there weren't any eyes. Just voids where there should be eyes. And I know it's looking at me. Felt like this thing was looking into me. Imagine the most intense you're not alone feeling you've ever had. This, but so much more intense. Holy shit. Nope. Commence dead sprint into bedroom. Try very unsuccessfully to sleep. Fuck that noise. When I was a teenager, my friends and I journeyed to the country outside Ames, Iowa, our hometown. There was, I shit you not, an old abandoned asylum out there, but we had to wait till nightfall to avoid the cops, and we had to park a ways away and huff it through the woods, a field, over a creek, at night. Flashlights in hand, me with my bulky VHS camcorder, we made our way through the countryside to the doors. They were chained shut, but loosely enough that we could slide through the space between when they were yanked open. The hallways were full of detritus, tubs, broken tiles, piles of pamphlets advertising their peaceable methods. Rooms held loose pipes hanging out of the walls, upturned chairs, water-stained walls. Disrepair didn't begin to cover it, and that was just what the flashlight beams showed us. Undaunted, drunk on the enviable stupidity of teenage years, we went up to the second floor. I saw an open door beckoning a room with strange walls. 2 of them were made solely of mesh chicken wire, revealing the whole of the countryside. It was a room where the patients could safely experience the outside world, but with the mesh so thick, all they could possibly think about was how they couldn't leave. Well, hell, even with that big red flag, I went into the attic with 2 of my friends, the remainder of the group staying below. This was something we'd whipped ourselves up for. This was a conquest, a mountain to climb, and the attic was the summit. And it was utterly spare compared to the rest of the asylum, except for one crucial element: a dollhouse. And if that old saying about clowns at midnight is true, it's double true for goddamn dollhouses. Reaching about to waist height, the dollhouse was unfurnished, Spartan, maybe 6 rooms total, 3 on 3, and the standard peak roof. Ordinary, except for one curious detail. A room on the corner with 2 walls made of small crisscrossing diagonal slats. And then I realized. The chicken wire room. Someone, a doctor, an aide, a patient, adapted this dollhouse to life in the asylum by adding the goddamn chicken wire room. That was enough. We went back down the stairs, gathered up the rest of our friends, and left. The county eventually bulldozed the asylum. Some years later, my VHS tape got mixed up with all the others or recorded over. I'll never forgive myself for that. But I did manage to scoop up one souvenir before I ran out into the starlit field at midnight. One of the pamphlets from the pile on the first floor. I still have it, and every time I see it, I think of a lonely child playing with that dollhouse, and the times he or she was lucky enough to spend time in the chicken wire room. My friend and I explored an abandoned house last week. When we got to the upstairs, one room had what seemed like a couple hundred photos of random people scattered all around. The kitchen had jars with food in it, and other food. And straight at the back of the hallway was a closed door, the only closed door in the entire house, with about 4 or 5 locks on it. Needless to say, we left when we saw that. The town over from my hometown used to have these pretty decent-sized brick yards out in the middle of the woods. Long abandoned, the only way to get to them were to trek through the woods for a while. The first time I visited the brickyards, my friends and I came across a tent that had been torn open. Clothes were thrown everywhere, along with some personal products. Intrigued, we decided to check the brickyards again. It was cloudy that night, so not much light from the moon was making it down. I want to say it was a group of about 6 of us. After making our way through the woods, we started to notice the power on all of our electronic devices was draining quickly. Cell phones, iPods, flashlights, all started dying. We go to a decent-sized covered area and started to explore. About 3 of us split up and went to check what appeared to be a tower. Within the tower was a maze of tunnels and what looked to be a boiler room at some point. We started to hear footsteps and tried to make our way through by following white arrows that were left on the walls. We eventually came to a room which contained a sleeping bag, backpack, candles, and some other stuff. Our minds quickly jumped to the idea that whoever was living here might be making those footsteps and quite possibly be dangerous. We got out of there as quickly as we could and met up with the other 3. They said they were hearing footsteps in the woods. Almost immediately, what sounded like a huge metal door slamming shut came from the tower. 2 of our friends took off running into the woods while the rest of them tried to catch up with them. Luckily, we all made it back to the road without getting lost. That is probably one of the nights that comes to mind whenever someone asks if I had any horror movie moments.